Have you ever felt like there's more to the world than meets the eye? Well, you're right. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden patterns all around us. We're talking about how the simple idea of where things happen can completely change how we see our world.
Think about it. Why do some neighborhoods have higher crime rates than others? Why does certain diseases pop up in one region but not another? These aren't just random coincidences. Nope, they're clues. And they all point to the same thing: location. Location is everything.
So, how do we find the answers? Well, the key is something called spatial analysis. It's this really cool way of looking at the world that lets us see the invisible connections on a map and finally understand the forces behind the patterns we see every day. Okay, so Section 1, digitizing our world. Before we can analyze anything, we have to figure out how to take our messy, complicated reality and turn it into clean data that a computer can actually understand. How do we even do that? Well, one of the most common ways is with what we call raster data. Now, I want you to picture laying a giant grid over the planet. Each little square in that grid holds a piece of information. It could be the temperature, how high the land is, you name it. It's like a super-powered, data-rich photograph of the Earth. So a regular map with its neat lines is great for showing things like buildings and roads. But what about something like a mountain range? It doesn't have sharp edges, right? It just flows. That's where this grid system, this raster data, is an absolute game changer. It captures that continuous landscape perfectly by giving every single cell its own elevation value. And this really boils down to two main types of data. You've got discrete data, things with clear boundaries like a lake or a building. It either is or it isn't. But then you have continuous data, which represents stuff that's happening everywhere, all the time, but is constantly changing. Things like temperature or elevation.
All right, Section 2, the Analyst Toolkit. So we've got our digital world. Now for the fun part. It's time to open up the toolkit and see how we can turn all that raw data into some seriously cool insights.
And it's actually incredible what you can find just hiding in plain sight. Even a simple elevation map is absolutely packed with information, just waiting for us to ask the right questions. For instance, we can run a slope analysis. In an instant, it calculates the steepness for every single one of those grid cells. So you're not just looking at a map of high and low spots anymore. No, you're actually seeing the difference between a gentle walk in the park and a seriously steep climb. Or, check this out, we can create what's called a hillshade. The computer pretends there's a sun in the sky, and it calculates exactly where all the shadows would fall. It makes the whole map pop, giving it this amazing 3D look that's so much easier for our brains to understand. And this toolkit isn't just for looking at pretty mountains. We can calculate something really practical, like distance. This map shows exactly how far every single spot is from the nearest town. And that's absolutely crucial if you're planning things like where to build a new hospital or how to route emergency services. But what happens when you have gaps in your data? Say you only have temperature readings from a handful of weather stations. How do you figure out the temperature between them? Well, there's a technique for that, and this quote describes it perfectly. Conceptually, it is like bending a sheet of rubber to pass through the points while minimizing the total curvature of the surface. That idea is called interpolation, and it's basically the science of making a really, really good guess. It's about filling in the blanks. The software takes the points you do know and uses some clever math to estimate what's happening everywhere else. And just like that, you get a complete, continuous surface from just a few data points. It's amazing. Section 3, finding the why. So we've gotten pretty good at seeing the what and the where, but that's not enough, right? We need to get to the why. What is actually causing those patterns we're seeing on the map? To get to the why, we need to bring in the big guns. And in this case, that means a powerful statistical tool called regression analysis. This is what lets us really dig in and explore the relationships between different factors to figure out what's driving the patterns. And there are two main ways to do this. First, you've got OLS. Think of it as the global model. It gives you one single big picture answer for your whole map. But then you've got GWR, the local model. This one is like using a magnifying glass. It creates a unique answer for every single location because it knows that relationships can change from place to place. For example, maybe high income is strongly linked to good health in a city, but not so much in the countryside. GWR can see that difference. OLS would just average it all together and miss the nuance. Section 4, a word of warning.
Now, all this stuff is incredibly powerful, but it's not magic. And if you're not careful, it's actually pretty easy to get results that are totally misleading or just flat out wrong. So let's talk about a few common traps to watch out for.
Okay, let's break these down. First, omitted variables. This one's simple. You're missing a key piece of the puzzle, so your answer's probably wrong. Then there's multicollinearity. That's when your ingredients are so similar, they're basically the same thing. It's like you're counting something twice, and that makes your whole model shaky. And finally, non-stationarity. That's the whole reason GWR exists. It's the simple fact that what's important in one place might be totally irrelevant somewhere else. A good analyst is always on the lookout for these things.
So, when you put it all together, what have we learned? I think the main takeaway is this. Spatial analysis is so much more than just making pretty maps. It's like a new lens for your eyes, a lens that lets you see the invisible connections between where we are and how we live. So the next time you look at a map, or even just look out your window, I want you to ask yourself, what are the hidden patterns here? What story is the where trying to tell me? Thanks for joining me.